Hello, hello. Good afternoon. And it's Friday for us here in Australia. It's 6 p.m. And today we have a very special guest. We are going to discuss if you have ever wondered if AI is going to take your job. Simon Kriss is here with us today to talk about the reality of what's happening in the world right now. Simon is a top voice of AI here in Australia. He's CEO of Sovereign AI, and he has more than 30 years of experience helping organizations in this technological transformation. Welcome, Simon. Thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thanks, Laura. No problem. It's interesting to join a call at what I love to call beer o'clock on a Friday. So this is good.
Yeah, so it's 0 o'clock, 1 o'clock. So thank you. We can have one after this.
I was going to say maybe we should have just asked everybody to bring a drink to the call. That would have been a smart way to do it.
Absolutely, yeah. And I'll keep that in mind for the next time. So, Simon, look, as I mentioned before, I'm very delighted and very grateful that you are gifting us this time of your this hour of your time and everything, because I know you're very busy and this AI is in the headlines everywhere. And there is this fear that unfortunately we are seeing around about AI taking our jobs and replacing us in the workplace. And you have a lot of experience and in conversations with the UN about what may happen in different countries. So, can you give us a bit of light on what is really what's going on? Like, what's really AI gonna do for us? Is it gonna replace us, or is it an opportunity to reposition ourselves?
I definitively am in the opportunity side. I don't think AI is going to replace as many jobs as we're seeing in the media. The media loves a negative story. Bad news sells. And they just wouldn't run with a story that said AI is going to create 1,000 new jobs. They would rather run with a story that says AI is going to kill all the jobs. I think there's kind of two sides to this. So, one side is that often people who are fearful that AI is going to take their job, it's because fear exists in a vacuum where there's no information. That's where fear comes in, right? Um, Fear that AI will take my job, fear that my job will change that much, I won't be able to do it, fear that I don't have the knowledge and skills to keep up with the new kids coming out of university, etc., etc. And I lay the blame for that at the door of the CEO of every organization, because the CEO should be out there leading from the front, telling people, okay, this is what we're doing with AI. This is where we're going to go with it. This is what it's likely to mean for jobs. Even if that initial message is, we don't know, but we're looking into it. It's at least giving people some sense of what's going on. But most CEOs are staying silent, and therefore all of their staff start to panic and worry about, what's going to happen. The other side of this is the reality, what's actually happening out there. And I had this discussion with a reporter just recently where he mentioned job loss, and I simply said to him, point me to the proof, point me to the evidence. Where is the evidence of these big job losses that you're talking about? Because I can't see them. I can see, small jobs being replaced, like we're talking tiny numbers. The biggest one that we've heard of is Atlassian, but in reality, Atlassian was already overstaffed. We all know that. And their share price was reflecting that. And they needed to right size. And so it was more that AI was a very handy um, enemy to point at and say, oh, that was the reason. But we all know that wasn't truly the reason. So we're just not seeing big shifts in employment yet in Australia, and I don't believe we're going to. I think we're going to see a lot of jobs repurposed. I think there will be new jobs that will come up. A lot of new jobs that don't exist today will come up. I think that the place where job loss is likely to be felt, and this is what I was talking about when I was at the UN, is that the job loss is likely to be felt in the developing nations. Because if you think for a moment about the types of jobs that AI goes after, it tends to be lower value, higher transactional, very repeatable type jobs. And most of the companies in Australia got rid of those years ago. We pushed them offshore. We pushed them to low cost locations like the Philippines and Honduras and South Africa and Fiji. So it's those places that are likely to feel more job loss. And unfortunately, a lot of those roles are held by females in those economies. So there's an imbalance there between male and female. And they're in economies that don't have the money to retrain their workforce. Some of these countries are trying to decide, do we put up another 5G tower or do we build a hospital? And so having money just to splash around like Australia and the UK has done on AI literacy just isn't quite happening. So I think we're going to see a digital divide between countries like Australia and those that are the developing nations. So yeah, that's kind of a long-winded answer to your question, but I'm just not seeing this drop of jobs.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, some of the headlines, I remember saying some like, I think here for Australia, the CBA or Commonwealth Bank about 40% of reduced the workforce because of AI projects, or, it's just, as you said, the negative headlines. And with work, as you say, you mentioned two things that come close to my heart. The first one is leadership, right? If the senior leadership or C level do not understand what AI can do for their businesses, for their people, for productivity, and for efficiency, then the whole organization is facing the challenge of staying behind, because reality is that AI is here, and the ones that embrace it are gonna, accelerate their growth or become more, better revenue or financially better position, go to market faster. And the people that stays with a decision of doing nothing or ignoring it, what because what do you think people can do today for them to realize, okay, AI is actually gonna impact me in one way or another, whatever role I do, whatever my organization that says what we do, what can someone do at work, like when they see all these things happening in AI?
Yeah, look, I've often said that the best defense is a good offense. So, the best roles are going to go to those people that move early, move fast. And so, if you really want to make sure that you're protected, you kind of need to dive into the deep end of AI. But AI is changing who we're hiring. So in the past, we used to really focus on IQ. Let's get the smartest people in here. AI, especially for the front line, is changing that. It's saying, well, actually, we need to recruit people with good EQ, right? That emotional quotient. Can you sympathize? Can you empathize? Can you detect the funny little nuances in somebody saying something, the sound in their voice or the expression on their face, those things that humans do 1,000 times better than AI. But we're also starting now to recruit for people with high LQ and high RQ. And those two things are, LQ is a learning quotient. So, do we have people in the organization that are learners that want to learn? Because the reality of AI is that you are now going to have to kind of sign up to learning every single day for the rest of your life. If you're in your 60s, like me, if you're in your 60s and you're thinking, I've done my career, I'm just going to coast and I don't want to learn any new stuff, you should probably just retire now, because AI is going to demand that all of us continue to learn. And then the last one is RQ, this resilience quotient. So if you we're all going to have to become more resilient than we are today. And that may be, very difficult for some millennials and things that, you just need more resilience. If you just looked at, let's take a call center worker as an example, 7 out of 10 of their phone calls are probably pretty easy. Where's my order? Where are the toilets at Tullamarine Airport? That really simple kind of stuff. And 3 or 4 out of 10 calls are really heavy load. So in the land of AI, all of those simple calls are gone. So 10 out of 10 calls are going to be heavy load, be that emotional load, cognitive load. It's going to be harder work. And you're going to have to call on those EQ skills a lot more than you do today. And so we're going to have to give people more breaks more often, because they're going to have to be more resilient in their work. So it's not so much, thinking about it from a change management perspective. This is about getting people to understand that LQ and RQ are now going to become a way of life. And as you said, you can choose to step away from AI as a company, and it's not even so much that your competitors are doing it, your customers are using it. So when your customer calls you, emails, reaches out, does whatever, internal customer or external customer, they're probably more educated, more aware, more informed than they've ever been before. And so if you choose to step away from AI, that's fine, but your customers are going to expect that you've gone on the same journey they have and that you know more. So, there's a whole lot of that kind of stuff going on. The other thing I want to pick up that you mentioned too is that when we look at AI and the way in which it's adopted in organizations, predominantly what we're seeing today is AI being adopted to exploit the technology, right? We want to use this technology to become stronger, faster, cheaper, better. The CFO loves it and the head of innovation loves it, and that's all fantastic stuff. But at some point, and some companies have already started to make this transaction, but it's a transition. But at some point, you're going to start exploring AI. So you're going to start saying, what new products, what new services can we offer? What new markets can we tap that we were never able to before, because either we didn't have bandwidth or we didn't have the data and the information and the insight that we have today. So AI is going to start to reshape businesses, not just make them more efficient. If you only think about exploiting AI, your brain naturally goes to job loss, but incredible job loss in a country doesn't work, because then your economy collapses because nobody's got money to spend on the products. So everybody fails. When you start thinking about moving towards exploring AI, that fundamentally changes the people that you need, the markets that you're in, the way in which this business operates. So rather than just thinking about shoehorning AI into an existing business model, we need to start thinking about what's the new business model, because new business models are being born every day. And traditional organizations are going to have to allow for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that, well, thank you for those concepts. So we can say that people should be able to stick to their core in terms of being human, with the resilience, with the learning, with the curiosity, and with the emotional intelligence that you were mentioning, that it's critical for us to keep growing into our roles, into our responsibilities, and the work we do.
Mm.
And that was the other part, the other topic that is close to heart for me, because I do have a lens on people and the impact that AI has in people. As you said, cognitive load, stress management, the rest, or the ability or the breaks you're going to have to give people so they can keep performing while this is happening. And again, I believe that in nature, women are also more exposed to that, with that invisible load that they also carry by decision, by choice, and other by circumstances. And we all need to be prepared to ensure that we develop that resilience and those human skills that are going to allow us to keep up with work and life, with all these drastic redesign of work, redesign of
Yep.
operations, and redesign of life, and the way we show up every day, because that's basically the way we show up every day.
Yeah. And particularly for managers, right? Managers in the past got promoted to being a manager because they knew how to do stuff. They knew how to do things, and they knew all the policies and all the procedures. Well, all of that knowledge now is in AI. What you're going to be looking for in management is those people that can work with it, and it should always have been the case. Those people that know how to work well with a team, those that know how to bring them in, how to motivate them, but also, if you go back to what I was talking about, the high resilience load, when to cuddle them and when to push them almost is kind of, we see groups like the London police using AI to listen to every call in real time. And as they detect that a call center, one of their police officers is taking a very heavy call, somebody's threatening to jump off a bridge or something, um, they can flag to the manager, go over and see that person. They're going to need support right now because of what they're dealing with. And that's a very different way of thinking about managerial styles. And so, it's really impacting the entire organization.
Yeah, I joke with the management or leadership roles in that space, because I say AI is here to enable you and make you better, but
Yep.
unfortunately it's also going to expose you, as you just clearly say. It's going to expose the lack of skills that you needed to be in for that specific role, right? So it's gonna
Mm.
expose the good ones and the bad ones. It's gonna
Yep. Very
enable the
true.
good ones and expose the bad ones. Yeah. So let's put a little bit of a lens of Australian market, and especially for our audience here. We spoke about the repetitive task, the repetitive job that we kind of offshore. We have seen, with the engineering resources and everything, assistance in Philippines, Honduras. What about the like in the IT industry, for example, that we are seeing some society, and what's gonna, like, how will AI help them to do better and perform better in their jobs?
Well, as much as I don't see the IT industry as being different to any other industry. Earlier this week, I was talking with the Society of Consumer Affairs Professionals, and these are people that they run complaint teams and dispute resolution teams and stuff. And they're asking the same question: how is it going to affect our industry? Last Saturday, I talked to 250 travel agents, and they were saying, how's it going to impact the travel industry? And it's kind of the same all the way through. There are some things, some skills that AI is going to have that, if you use them the right way, will speed you up. But AI doesn't know what you know. Right. So let's say you're asking AI to write some code for you, and in 6 different places you have to run a certain routine. It's quite common when you look at code that's been output by AI that it rewrites that routine 6 times. Whereas a good programmer knows write it once, call it 6 times. So there's going to be this big shift from maker or doer to checker, right? And that's going to be true for everybody. This will be true for IT crews. This will be true for coders. This will be true for accountants. This will be true for lawyers, for everybody. Is we're going to have to get better or get used to checking somebody else's work rather than doing it ourselves. So our value as humans will be that higher level thing where we bring our expertise to the task, right? So if you're someone who has 30 years of accounting experience, you can look at a column of numbers and almost instantly scan down and halfway down go, what? Wait, hang on, that number can't be right. That doesn't make sense. You just intuitively know this because you've been doing it for 30 years. So my concern then is if you've got those people today that are those checkers, what do we do with the kids just coming out of university that don't have 30 years of experience and therefore don't know what to look for? So I think for a lot of us that would be on this webinar, our job is going to first change to becoming the checker, but then it's rapidly going to move to becoming the trainer of checkers. So teaching this next generation of workers that comes through behind us what to look for. What are you doing? You know, I did a talk for the Institute of Internal Auditors. Now, you know, you would think that would be the most boring group of people on the planet, but they had some great questions. And one of their questions was, is AI coming to take our job? And I said to them, actually, I believe that internal auditing is probably the one part of every major organization that's going to grow, because you're going to have to audit everything. You have to audit the outputs of your public facing chatbot. You have to audit the outputs of your agentic workflows and processes. You have to audit the new code that's being written. So, you know, I think people with 30 years of experience in a field don't need to kind of panic that AI is going to do their job. AI will do the donkey work part of their job, but their role will be to check the AI. You know, it's like working with 3 brand new graduates out of university. It'll be the same thing. You'll be looking over what they do.
Yeah, and you mentioned something, and I probably is the perfect segue about, the supervising and the checking. And when we, as human in the loop, have to oversee the AI output, and this was an excellent observation on auditors. Let's pivot a little bit of the Australian sovereignty, because it has to be sovereignty, and that's where you are really, really, really focusing on.
Yeah.
Can you give us an insight of this work that you do, and what do you see in terms of this readiness and checking and sovereignty and policy and governance that needs to happen?
Yeah, so this just turned into a 3-hour discussion. Um, I think, look,
Yeah.
the work that I'm particularly doing, other than I kind of wear 2 hats. I do a lot of strategy and governance and consulting work for organizations, but I'm also CEO of a startup, Sovereign Australia AI, that's trying to build an Australian language model from scratch, a foundation model right here in this country. So I don't believe that our end game is to continue renting our future from the US. And, you know, it's essentially digital colonization is what's going to happen to us. We'll be colonized by them. And the same with China or France. I also don't think our future lies in trying to fine tune open weight models from other countries, because we still don't know, open weight is not open source. And so, open weight models, great, you can tune them a bit, but you don't know what the data set was. You don't know what bias has been introduced at the base of the model. At best, you can probably only change 50% of the weights, and you're probably only changing the weights in English. So, that kind of model is a great place to start, but that's not sovereignty. That's domestic, but it's not sovereignty. So for me, sovereignty has 6 layers in AI. The first layer at the bottom is that layer around data centers, GPUs, CPUs, RAM, the hardware and the power and water that it takes to do that. The next layer is the model layer, right? And most of us on this call are probably using Anthropic's model, OpenAI's model, Mistral's model, or some other open weights model from overseas. You might be using DeepSeek or Kimi or whatever. Then there's the layer of agentic. So whose software are you using to build your agentic flows? Are you just using Microsoft? Are you using whatever? Then there's a layer above that is the observability and control. So what control planes are you using? What harnesses? What orchestration layer? Whose software are you using? How are you ensuring cybersecurity and all that sort of stuff? Because AI opens up a whole pile of new cybersecurity issues. Then you've got your application layer. Right. And, this is where we hear the big names that get talked about in the newspaper, the Canvas and Harrison AIs and blah, blah, blah. That's great. And then the sixth layer is really regulation. What is the government doing around sovereignty? And I want to be really clear. You can't get sovereignty from a US company. Right. I just want to apologize to Amazon, Microsoft, Google, OpenAI, all of those right now. But the US has a piece of legislation that's been around for almost 8 years now called the US Cloud Act. And if people haven't looked it up, they really should. What the Cloud Act says is that the US government, particularly the FBI, but the US government can compel any company to share any data on any server anywhere in the world. Whether it owns it or rents it, it's fair game. And if they're a provider, like a Microsoft or a Google, they're not allowed to tell the client that they're looking. So here in Australia, you and I have our My Health data stored in an Amazon cloud. The FBI can look at Laura's health data whenever they want. So anything that comes through a hyperscaler is never going to be sovereign. And that's also why you'll never hear the hyperscalers talking about it. But that's kind of the layers of sovereignty in AI. Sitting off to the side of that is how that interacts with your company, right? Because some of your processes may not need sovereignty. Some of your processes may just not need that. Some might, because you've got very sensitive data or data that's not redacted or something like that, right? So if you think about a simple use case like let's listen to every call, transcribe it, and write a 50-word summary for the CRM, great. But if you haven't redacted the transcription, then the customer's name, address, phone number, date of birth, credit card, all of that stuff is going through a model. And in all probability, the GPU for that model is not in this country. So, you kind of want to look at where you need sovereignty there. You've also got the organization's values and ethical stands, the ethical and responsible AI framework that they have. What is their ethical position on this stuff? You've got the AI governance and data governance models, right? Never forget data governance because it's intrinsically tied to AI governance. You've got the organization's ontology. How do they operate? What are their standing operator? So there's all of these things that kind of go in together to you know, talk, because for some companies, they don't want and they don't need a human in the loop for some of their processes. If you're British Paints and people are choosing a paint color, do you need a human in the loop on that? You may want a human in the loop when somebody asks something like, "Can I drink the paint?" You might want a human there for that. But if you're a provider to the NDIS, that's a very different situation. You have highly vulnerable clients in highly vulnerable situations. And so you're going to need more human in the loop. I was tickled when the Victorian office of the OIC came out and said, for Victorian government, you are not allowed to let AI make a decision, was their first statement. And I kind of looked at that and went, So when Microsoft Teams does a summary of a call, it's making a decision about what it puts in the summary and what it doesn't, isn't it? So what does an AI decision mean? So look, I think there's a long way to go to get all of this teased out. I was in Canberra early this week talking to ministers on both sides of both of the major parties, because they're all trying to figure out, how do we do this? How do we control this stuff?
Yeah, well, definitely a lot of food for thought in that area because it does not end in data policy or AI policy. It just goes so much more deeper, right? And as
Yeah.
users of AI and these tools and models, it's important that at least we are aware of what we are working on, right? And using it for, as you clearly said. And
And and and what's your ethical position?
and
Right. So
ethics.
here's a great question for everybody, right? Should we all be transparent about our use of AI? Now, invariably in a big group, everybody says, yes, yes, we should. And my next statement is, great. So you'd be willing to put on your next report, 50% of this report was written by AI. And they say, no, I wouldn't do that. It's like, well, hang on. You just said a minute ago you wanted to be transparent. Now you're saying you don't want to be transparent. And we're stuck right now in this time when AI is considered cheating. Right. So when we talk about our kids using AI at school, it's always in the preface of cheating, right? When Deloitte turned out that really horrible report, and people were saying they should give the money back. And I thought they should give some money back just because they didn't check their AI slop, right? That's something. But other people were saying, oh, they should give the money back because they used AI to write it, which immediately goes to it's cheating. And that's the same thing that we've had around the calculator, around the screw cap bottle for wine, and around an automatic transmission in a car, right? At some point, they were all considered cheating. I remember, I'm much older than you, Laura. I remember going to exams and being told you cannot bring a calculator into an exam because it's cheating, right? You're never going to have a calculator in your pocket when you walk around. Well, I hate to tell them, but I have a calculator in my pocket. It's and AI's suffering the same thing. Nobody right now would put in a report. Every calculation in this report was done using Excel. Yeah, actually, people, if you did that, people would say, "But why wouldn't you use Excel?" And we're not there with AI yet. Another couple of years, I think people would be saying things like, "Why wouldn't you use AI?" But right now, they're still kind of classing it as cheating. So that creates what we call situational ethics. In this situation, it's okay. In this situation, it's not. And I'll give you another example. There's a woman in the US called Karen Marjorie. She's an influencer. She's got about 5 million followers on Instagram and stuff. Now influencer is a job, so I'm told. Um, I couldn't do it, but and she was the first, not the last, but the first to produce Karen AI, or in other words, I will be your girlfriend for $1 a minute, and it was $1 a minute. Now, everybody that signed up knew that they were paying $1 a minute. She wasn't ripping anybody off. But I often say to groups, I'll be your girlfriend for $1 a minute. Is that an ethical use of AI? And often you'll have groups going, oh, no, that's not ethical. And I say, hang on, let's separate ick, because it's ick. Let's separate that from is it ethical? And then think about it this way. What if I'm someone who's high on the ADHD scale and the world is a very noisy, confusing place? And it really helps me if I have somebody that I can chat with that calms me down before I go out into that world. Now, is it an ethical use? And so, once again, we get this situational ethics. So, nothing around AI is easy. I love it when people say, oh, AI is simple. AI is not simple. The ethical limits are just huge. The problems we have to solve, even in this country, the problems we have to solve with AI are massive. What do we do about indigenous languages in this country? If I'm trying to build a language model, I have to look at the indigenous languages. Now, there's 200 of them plus, so which one do I choose? But even then, our indigenous population, like many indigenous populations, don't write down the data. They tell it in stories. They talk about the dream time. And so, how do we capture that data? And people say, well, you go up to the Northern Territory and you sit with the elders and you record that. But if I'm recording that, am I now appropriating that culture in a way that I should? There's the levels of ethical questions that come in under some of this stuff is just absolutely huge. And that's the stuff we should be focusing on, not am I still going to have my job tomorrow, and why won't Microsoft Copilot give me a picture of Donald Trump? Like, they're just not the things we should be focusing on.
Absolutely, absolutely. That is incredible. Like, definitely, we really need to rethink how we see AI, how we use AI for everything, and how our data it's used around. And while you were talking, I was thinking just a little bit in our previous conversations about this is another technological transformation. It's not the first time we go through.
Oh, it's not the first.
Yeah, because for what can we say to people that is like still hesitant, still scared, thinking that is cheating, thinking that the world is gonna end? Like,
We've seen
what
this.
do you say to them?
We've seen this before 100 times over. If you go right back, there used to be 100 guys in the field with hand tools digging up the dirt. And the only job that existed other than digging the dirt was making the hand tools, right? One guy made the wooden handle and one guy made the metal bit. And then they figured out that they could use a horse to pull a plow. So now we only need 10 guys in the field, not 100, but now we need people to breed horses, make horseshoes, make a leather harness. We had to build iron foundries that could make these big plows out of steel. So all these great jobs. And then somebody invented the diesel engine. And so we made tractors. Now you only need one guy in the field, and the guy who made the handles and the guy who made the tools for digging, they're long gone. But now we have people making pneumatic tires. We have people being diesel mechanics and building engines and making plastics and all of these other things that sprung up, still just trying to get a potato to grow in the ground, right? We're still essentially trying to achieve the same thing. And so, there was so many stories when steam trains started of people standing at the station and the steam train was right there, and it's this huge piece of metal, and they're saying that thing will never move. They'll never get it to go. And of course, it starts spinning at wheels and chuff, 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 chuff. And as it goes around the bend and it's reached 30 and 40 mile an hour, they're kind of going, yep, they'll never get it to stop. Like, This type of thing, the advent of electricity, the advent of the internet in the 1970s. Who had ever heard of SEO or SEM before then? Right? It just those terminology didn't even exist. Now there are huge businesses built around SEO and SEM. Granted, they're both about to get kind of wiped out a bit by AI, but you know what I mean? This is not new. The guy that used to go around and light the candles in every lantern on the street, well, he kind of changed when that all became electrified. He started changing light bulbs, and then they went to LED lights, and that. So humans have seen this again and again and again. The advent of the personal computer meant we didn't have typing pools. You know, we used to have all these people sitting at typewriters going for it, but the whole human race hasn't collapsed because we put in personal computers, and AI is going to be the same. Humans will adapt. Now, the thing I find really interesting about humans is we only tend to change when we're right at the edge of the cliff. We wait until the edge of the cliff. So when does somebody start going to the gym? When the doctor says you're pre-diabetic, and if you don't start it, when does somebody stop smoking? When the doctor says you're a candidate for lung cancer. So people only change those things when they're at the edge, and that's why I'm saying those that really want to cement their place for tomorrow should be ramping up their learning right now. You know, if you're worried about AI in your company, become the AI champion, and then you start to steer how AI is used in your company, right? That old best defense is a good offense.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic, and really, a lot this resonates with me. Like we have seen it, and I think also if a way to approach this as well is, well, if you are scared, learn about it, understand it, study it. Don't just close the door and close your mind and just don't look. It's not happening. It's not happening, because it's happening.
Yep.
And if you do nothing, that's making already you are making a decision of not doing nothing. And so and I think you're absolutely right. Like we start acting or adopting until we see the edge of it, and we spoke
Yep.
about what we can do if we sit down, like in like work in the workplace, that regardless of the role, regardless of the industry, keeping that mind open, that curiosity for learning, that resilience developing. What can anyone in their jobs do today so they don't wait until we get to the age? Like, is there like not a shortcut, but like three steps framework or something you can advise to all of our audience? How can they start thinking and embracing to become the champion and AI to think in their current role? Another tip of that.
Yeah, look, I think there's a few things you can do. One is, just start using AI more at home. That's the best place to start. And if you can't think of a use case for AI in your home, here's one for free. If you have kids, grandkids, nieces, nephews, anybody kind of about age 3 to about age 10 or 12, ask AI, ask any language model to write a custom bedtime story for your child where they are the star of the story, right? I want a story where Mary, age 7, is the star of the story. She has her little dog, Pongo, or she has her favorite doll or whatever, and it's set in the land of unicorns. And you can even say, I want you to weave in the basic idea that talking to strangers is not good, right? And AI will start to produce custom stories. Now, before you get a chance to learn more, your child who isn't constrained in their thinking is going to start pushing you to say, do another story, but this time I want the frogs to be in it, and I want this and that over there and that. And they will start to blow your mind around how they use a tool. Because when you give a tool like this to a child who's unconstrained, the way in which they use it will just blow your socks off. So I would start using it at home, right? Get your hands dirty, play with the tools. The second one is there is a ton of free, like really good free online tutor sessions that you can go and do, and some of them, I watched one the other day. It was a 1 hour Stanford lecture, but it was by a mathematician, and he was talking about, just sharpening the probability, in other words, temperature, and it was all in mathematics. But you don't have to start there. Microsoft's got a course, Google's got a course, and they're 13, 14 units long. Some of those units are only 5 or 6 minutes. So instead of laying in bed tonight and death scrolling on Facebook or on TikTok, go and find one of those courses and just do one every night or every second night and just start to build your knowledge. One of the great people that does this is Andrew Ng, surname NG, Andrew Ng. And he just produces some really great quality content that's completely vendor neutral, but it talks in basic human talk. It doesn't talk at you like you're got a degree in computer programming. So there's a lot of options. Once you've done those two, then at work, just start thinking each task that you go to pick up, think, is there a way AI could do this for me? And maybe you don't have the tools in your company, maybe you do, maybe you don't. But the ability to pretty rapidly prototype something is absolutely incredible. So here's an example. I was working with a person who works at the local council, and they were looking for things at work. And while they were thinking about it, one of their jobs is they get emails from citizens saying, we'd like to book the town hall. And there's 3 town halls. So they're handling all these bookings. And they just did that. Is this something AI could handle? And at night, at home, they jumped onto Claude and they said, could you design me a little HTML page where someone could book? And so they did that. They did 2 or 3 iterations of it. And then they went into work and went to see the head of IT and said, look, I've built this at home. Could we build something like this? Guess what? Now they're leading the AI, the AI work stream within the local council. So that would be my start small and just work into it. You don't need a degree. You just need to get your hands dirty.
Absolutely, absolutely. And as you said, you don't need to be the expert. I've been talking to many people because this is also
I don't think there's such a thing as an expert.
as an expert.
As
Yeah.
soon as I hear somebody say, I'm an expert, I'm an AI expert, I'm an AI guru, I know everything about AI, that is like the biggest immediate red flag, because nobody, and a very good friend of mine is John Whittle, who was the ex-managing director of CSIRO's Data 61. He's been in AI. He got his PhD in algorithmic mathematics 30 years ago. He was building algorithms at NASA. Like, if you were going to attach the word guru to anybody, it would be him. If you say to him, are you an AI expert? He says, hell no. Because there is just, you can't know what AI is doing in agriculture and in medicine and in drug and in, road construction and in rail. It's just, you couldn't possibly. So yeah, you can't be an AI expert, is my opinion.
Yeah, no, totally. And what I have seen is that some people holds back because they fear that they don't know, they are not experts. So definitely understanding that no one is an expert, you can actually give it a go. And I think AI is bringing the opportunity without being tech or having tech background or being exposed. You can definitely use it. And I love that use case at home with those to have little ones, or even I even, for the full
Right.
disclosure, sometimes I use like, how do I argue with my teen son? How do I
There you
respond
go.
to this?
Look, there's a there's some amazing AI for good out there. Like there are some just incredibly good things we're doing with AI. If you haven't seen it yet, have a look at the company Andromeda here in Australia. They've built a little Abby robot that they put into elderly retirement homes to cure loneliness and just. But there's one called Raising Zoe, and this was built by a couple who are raising an autistic child, and it's designed for not for the child, but designed for the parents and the teachers to be able to do exactly what you just said, Laura. Zoe doesn't want to go to school today. What can I do? How can, because they're just at their wits' end. How else could I frame this? What else can I, like, and that's, there's some beautiful use cases around stuff like that.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much for giving us your evening and for this amazing knowledge that you could share with us. A lot of insights, but a quick of like a recap. Don't be afraid of using AI. Start with an open, learning, curious, emotional intelligence, resilient mindset, because that's what you're gonna need to, keep succeeding, or as I call it, to thrive in your life, in your work, and
Yep.
be aware of what's going out there. Study, learn, take courses. It is free. There's a lot of free available content, as you were saying, and lessons directly from the creators, or like, the Microsoft, the Google's, Clouds, OpenAI, everyone.
Yep.
And think about, how to use it for good, and develop those use cases that are going to be here. And there is no reason to fear. We have been here many times, and human is always adaptable. And if there's something that we should be very happy for, is that this is just going to be another tech wave that we are going to embrace and adapt and develop new roles, develop new skills that we do not
Yep.
know that are today that will be there tomorrow.
Yeah,
And
it's a big tech. It's a big tech wave. This isn't just surfing in the shallows. This is surfing the big wave, and it's in a compressed timeline. So when the internet came along, we had 7 or 8 years before everybody had a website and stuff. This one's going to happen in a much shorter. Like the amount we've moved in the last 3.5 years since ChatGPT launched is off the chart. So the timeline is getting shorter and shorter. It's kind of exponential. But there's a thought I'd love to leave everybody with.
please,
And
yes.
it's an analogy that I use at the end of every one of my keynote talks. And it's that AI, especially generative AI, is a lot like teenage romance. Everybody's talking about it. Everybody thinks everybody else is doing it. But the reality is, not that many people are really doing it. So don't feel like I'm miles behind and I've missed the boat and I'm too old and all. Don't think that. You are exactly where the vast majority of the population of Australia is today. And so, just take heart and move on.
Yes, thank you very, very much, Simon. And thank you to our listeners. And we'll see you next. Thank you very, very much.
Thanks, Laura.